Hello, everyone. Welcome to Wednesday afternoon. I'm Alex Mersberger, one of the co-founders of the Advancement League. I am going to let Kurt and Julie introduce themselves as we begin to answer questions. And so just wanted to start off saying thank you so much for the time and the attention. We know, especially in even I think more so in the virtual world, you have infinite options of where you could be right now. And so thank you so much for spending a little bit of it with us and on such an important topic and conversation that we want you to be a part of and that will benefit from your expertise as well. We also just want to reiterate how much we hope that you and your families and loved ones are safe and happy and healthy during these times. And I think after a week of Thanksgiving, I think we also have a lot to be grateful for. So we're grateful that all of you joined and that we're here. And I personally am super excited for the conversation. So a while back, we asked Advancement League followers through social media channels and through a survey after one of our events. And we asked them to rate on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being the best, how well does your organization look outside of the healthcare industry for answers to its challenges? And so we said, your healthcare leaders, how well does your organization look outside of yourself? Almost 70% of the respondents said that their organization was a 5 or below. The same scale was asked to use a separate question: how creative are your employees and coworkers around you in solving your organization's challenges? And so nearly the same results. 60% said creativity was at a 5 or below. And so I think we see just the general broad trends. Healthcare and education, I think at a societal level, are at some sort of inflection point or crisis point. You could say sort of complex, expensive, time consuming, all those words. So that's why we're so excited as Advancement League to partner with Dignity Health Global Education with DHGE. They have the expertise in digital experiences, engaging online communities, creating experiences that people love. And they also have that talented roster of connections of both inside industry and outsider expertise. I think you probably saw some of the commercials they've put out lately with everything from NFL players to shot putters and track and field stars. And so I think blending the world that they live in with a lot of the world that we live in as healthcare leaders is going to be the perfect pair for a future of healthcare and of education that's more accessible, more affordable, more fair, and a better experience for all. So like I said, I'll let Julie and Kurt, they're the stars of this show. I'll let them introduce themselves as they begin to answer a few questions that have been submitted beforehand. And we want you to be part of the conversation. So we're going to get through a couple of the questions with them. And then we would love for you to get into the chat and ask your own questions. Whatever is on your mind, try to throw some curveballs at us and we'll see if we can get through them. So I'll pose the first question for Julie. If you could introduce yourself and then jump into the answer. So with all that's going on in the world right now, the ever increasing speed of societal change and sort of every moment of every day is a new challenge, a new thing. Does the available healthcare curriculum meet current demands? And will it meet the demands of the future?
Thanks, Alex, for the invitation, and thanks everybody for showing up. I know we all spend a lot of time sitting and on Zoom, so we do appreciate the time and that you're giving us today. I am sort of a traditional academic. Went to school at Johns Hopkins, got my PhD in genetics, did bench work, NIH funded. You know, started training. My first real job was at University of Pittsburgh Medical School, and I was training physicians and faculty, et cetera, and started getting into education. Taught in the med school, really enjoyed it. Continued on and eventually closed my lab, went and became academic dean at George Washington University and Georgetown University, and then recently was a dean for a small school service and college that was totally devoted to the healthcare workforce and training. And as that person, you know, we actually were owned by a healthcare system, and so we had to take all the training that was required in the healthcare system. And I can say it varied from comical to painful, but rarely invaluable. It would not be uncommon to see people that had their learning module going and they were on another screen actually doing work, and people used it as a check off. I did my training on Cornerstone. I can now go on with my day, etc. And part of the problem is, I think, is how a lot of that is created, right? It's variable in quality. A lot of it is purchased off the shelf. A lot of it's check off or JECO. You have to, if I had one more training session on how to wash hands, I was going to jump out the window. It's not based on learning theory, right? And so obviously people need more than that, right? As you mentioned, Alex, this field is just rapidly evolving. And so when we do our assessment with our learners, we do a pre-course survey, and we always ask, why are you taking this? And we expect, a little cynical, like, to get my CEUs. But reality, very few people actually check that box. The number one reason people are taking these classes is because they want to increase their performance for their current job. And overwhelming across all of our courses. So that says something to us, right? That there's a real hunger, a real need for the types of courses that we're creating. The other part of our assessment that we do, we're not just, did you learn this? But we actually, at the end of the course, say, okay, these are all the things that you wanted to learn. Did you actually learn them? Are you actually using them yet? And then we go back 3-6 months later and say, if you're using these new skills that you learned, how is it impacting the organization? Who's it impacting? And so we're creating a curriculum that's all about transferable skills, immediate impact, and empowering people with the knowledge and skills that they need to do their job better, to get promotions, to get more responsibility, to have greater job satisfaction and security and confidence. So long-winded answer, is the available curriculum doing its job? We would have to say, because of what we're hearing, there's plenty of room for improvement there.
It's a long question and a big question. It deserves a long answer. I think we could spend the whole time on that. So Kurt, we'll get your thoughts as well. Does the available healthcare curriculum, is it meeting current demands, and how will it meet the demands of the future?
Sure. And thank you, Alex, for having me. I appreciate everybody taking the time to join the webinar today. My name is Kurt Hayes, and I'm the Chief Learning Experience Officer here at Dignity Health Global Education. And I spent the last 17 years in the education space, and the vast majority of that time has been focused in online learning. And it's my personal mission to rid the world of subpar online learning experiences, which in the wake of COVID, it's unfortunately become even a more challenging goal. And so my master's degree is in adult education for distance learning, and my work focuses on creating meaningful and authentic learning experiences that result in a good investment of time and money. And it's something that I think we all want to make good use of. So in terms of the current healthcare curriculum meeting needs and looking at it from a futuristic perspective, there's a few different ways to look at it. One, we can look at it from the aspect of competency areas. Healthcare education has largely been bundled into huge packages in the forms of degrees. And it's centered on a job function. So in a way, we have a bunch of sledgehammers that are designed to meet the needs of the incoming workforce. But that's not necessarily a bad thing. There's always going to be a need for the incoming healthcare workforce. I don't see the workforce shortage ending anytime soon. But what about all the other people that are already employed? What about them? And what about the skills that they're saying that they need, and the skills that these companies are saying they want more development in? And so I think that we need to focus on more skills-based education around specific competencies. As an example, I was speaking with a nursing director recently, and he was telling me about how throughout his entire nursing education, he had just a sprinkling of business topics. But here he is running a department with a P&L, with expected financial outcomes and everything else within this hospital. And so we hear about this need for business education around healthcare or healthcare business education, all the time, topics like the economics of healthcare, finance, operations, and so on. And, these are all competencies that are required to operate hospitals efficiently and effectively. And so what I see happening is a focus more on shorter, more skills-based opportunities for the existing workforce. And so that's the first area that I see, related to this topic. But the other is about access and quality. Even before COVID, it was expensive and difficult to get people into a classroom, especially in healthcare. To organize people's schedules and classroom-based training in healthcare is near impossible. And so companies turn to e-learning and webinars to disseminate information and knowledge. But so often those are just passive learning experiences, kind of like what we're sitting through today. Everybody has, played the game of, find the shortest path to the end of the e-learning piece, right? How many times, how do I get to the end the fastest? And, to be honest, unless, the audience does something intentionally to recall what they're learning from today's session, it's highly likely everybody's going to forget the majority of this in a week, 2 weeks, and so on. It's just the essence of how our brains work. They're designed to forget the information that's not deemed non-essential. So, what we believe is that we can provide access to high quality learning experiences that are designed to stick and affect real behavior change in the workforce. And, as Julie mentioned about our surveys, we're so committed to this that we measure our programs even after they conclude to look at what type of, skill change there was and effect that program had on that individual's work and department and so on. And so that's the kind of commitment to competency development that I think healthcare educators as a whole need to make to meet the demands of the future. If we think about it, time is valuable, learning is time, and so let's make it useful, right? Let's get a return on that. And the last piece I want to talk about is value. Training and development budgets have always been the first to go, but high value upskilling doesn't have to be costly. It just has to be intentional. It has to be intentional in what the goal is, intentional in the approach. And so, what we've done is we've brought some of the most respected schools in the nation to the table, and we're delivering them in a way that delivers value on that time and money. And, we're providing learning experiences that affect positive change in people's jobs without a huge price tag. That price tag is, people just assume, oh, it's expensive, but it's not. And it doesn't have to be expensive either, from a time or money perspective. And so, that's how I see healthcare education changing to meet the demands of the future. And, we see, signs of that obviously in our own work, but we see signs of that across the education, sector. While it's moving a little slower than we'd like, we've got the gas pedal pegged, and we're moving as fast as we can.
I love that you one of our LinkedIn posts are highlighting this partnerships. We asked for feedback on education experiences that members went through, and a lot of their comments were around the need for experiential opportunities. So a lot of people focused around sort of the best experience I had during my education was actually like the internship, the work portion of it. And so we saw a lot of them sort of questioning or asking for more education that was similar to like vocational training or that hands-on sort of real-time on-demand education. And you definitely hit that of just that value and access and education wrapped around sort of that work experience. Is that what's missing? I think, Julie, you talked about just industry-wise, and you've been at a couple different organizations. You see it on the education side where sort of there's a lot of players jumping into the education world, and why there might be some subpar experiences on the online side is just sort of everyone's going there. There will probably be some consolidation, both on the education side and on the healthcare side. How does that sort of affect all of the things that are missing, and what needs to change across the higher education and healthcare landscape?
Well, I don't know if anybody's ever been in higher ed and experienced faculty governance, but it's like, as an academic dean, if I wanted a new program, I had basically a 2-year ramp, right? Because you have to go through so many different approval processes and through the different governance bodies in higher ed. I mean, one of the things that we do well is to be flexible and nimble and responsive. Now let's think about what's happened to healthcare in the past 9 months. You know, economically, what's happened to hospitals? You know, they've been decimated often. You know, you see all the time the hospitals closing, or so looking forward, it's like there's going to be mergers, there's going to be acquisitions. You're going to have to think about how you might work together as, you know, maybe even competing organizations. We saw what happened to the supply chain at the beginning of the pandemic, where you couldn't get PPE and you had hospitals hoarding it because they might need it and they weren't going to share. So we're going to have to rethink so much of what healthcare does, right? And so there's going to be a steep learning curve, and there's going to be something of an emergency learning curve. Even think about, you know, the built environment, how ventilation works in a hospital, how patient traffic works in a hospital. All of a sudden, it's like you don't want just everybody going into the same ER door if you know 20% of those folks have COVID and 80% don't. And how do you segregate your populations, right? So you're gonna have to think about the built environment. You're gonna have to think about mergers. You're gonna have to think about, you know, all this technology. Now, I don't know that we'll ever go back to normal practice. People kind of like telemedicine. You know, if I don't have to take an hour off of my day to go into you know, to see my doctor or whatever, but can do, you know, a 5-minute call, whatever. I think telemedicine's here today. I think, you know, this sort of distribution of access to care is probably going to stay. This pandemic really put a bright light on inequities in access to care and health outcomes. I think we're all going to have to face that. We're going to have to face that in the education world and the healthcare world, right? So I think a lot of this pandemic has pushed some things forward, especially technology. You know, data privacy is going to be more and more important. Every instrument or every time you interact with a computing system or a data storage system in healthcare, that is a potential data breach. Look at all the data breaches we've seen, where whole systems had to shut down for a few days and go to paper. So we've got this healthcare workforce. How do we support them? You've got to be flexible. You've got to be responsive. You got to be nimble. And actually, while we're talking, I would love everyone to just, you know, throw in the chat box how anything that you've noticed in your job that's changed as far as your duties, your responsibilities, or what do you think's coming down the pike that you better get ready for. So I'd love to hear from the audience as far as what you guys are working with now and what you're thinking about and what's waking you up at 3 o'clock in the morning with that cold sweat.
Yeah, the just what you said about from data to built environment to sort of fraud and security risks and mergers. It is crazy to think just somewhat of the traditional education system. If you sit through a master's of healthcare administration or public health or those things, you might go through a 2-year sort of very in-depth world. And some of it, maybe you're even working at that same time. And so you're getting that education through your organization. And then all of a sudden you merge with a new organization and they sort of view the world differently. And so you have to almost like unlearn what you just learned for those 2 years and then relearn. And so I love that ability to be nimble, I think, in the future is sort of going to drive probably every industry. And I think especially healthcare and education, if there's constantly new things, that means you constantly have to learn new things. And then you have to turn around and sort of you owe it to everyone else to pay that forward and say, here's what we're learning and here's why. And so that goes into some of that sort of creativity. I think you had touched on that earlier. I think both of you might have touched on that in the surveys of employers that you see, employers, I think, complain that graduates across probably all industries, but within the healthcare world too, they complain that graduates are not well prepared for the working world. There's sort of that us against them mentality a little bit. And one of those missing ingredients we talked about is creativity and that sort of fast-paced ability to learn on the fly. how can we infuse that into healthcare with educational offerings, and how do you sort of spur creativity through education?
Yeah, Alex, I'll take a stab at that. And just to add a little bit also to, what needs to change. When you started, this webinar, you were talking about the respondents and, how they, really wanted to see their organization look outside. That resonated with me because it's exactly what we hear in our conversations that we have with healthcare professionals from across many different organizations. And, in fact, I was on a call just days ago with an executive talking about their internal leadership training. And this is, at an unnamed hospital system. But they were concerned that, all the leadership training they were being provided was all internal knowledge, meaning that, the advice and the examples were from all in their own ranks. And so they wanted to know what the outside world did. What advice does, do other industries offer? Because, their concern was just like everyone else's, that their own issues were already likely caused by their own thinking. So how can they, find examples of what others were doing? And so, I think every system, would benefit from collaboration with people outside their organization, even their own industry. Look at what the tech industry is doing. Look at, what manufacturing is doing. Look at every other industry. I think we can find examples. And so, the model we follow is to listen from within and answer from outside. And so, we hear what the workforce needs from within the health system, and then we go looking for the best academic or industry partner with knowledge in that space. And, who's the most renowned in that area? And then that's who we bring to the table, to answer that issue that we, found. And so I just wanted to add that bit because I think that's really what needs to change. Inside of healthcare is that, and specifically healthcare education, is that we need to see more collaboration between higher education and healthcare outside of just the clinical areas. The clinical areas, there are great examples of collaboration, and that's obviously insanely important. But there's so much more to healthcare, and there's so much more to operating efficient health systems and effective health systems. And so, the other thing that I think is ripe for change is the approach. This mass production approach to learning has to change. I think we need really responsive and adaptive learning pathways for the workforce. As an example, we're working with executives from across Arizona, that are going to participate in a customized education pathway by sequencing different certificate programs together from different universities. So you can imagine these executives from across the state collaborating together from across health systems on curriculum produced by different universities, all throughout, a program designed, to meet the needs that they have, said that they have within their, within their systems. And so that's the kind of change that I think we need. And that's also, leads into the creativity piece. I think that we have to have these creative approaches to lead to real, effective change within the organizations. And so, Julie talked earlier about, looking outside of healthcare. You mentioned the athletes, Alex, that we've, brought into some of our programs. And, just to kind of add on that, yeah, we did. We brought 3 world-class athletes in to develop part of our curriculum for the mini MBA program, because we thought, all right, healthcare needs to win after COVID. And who knows better to win, how to win at something than professional athletes. They've all had to bounce back from defeat. They had to accomplish the impossible. They had to drive through adversity, all the things that all of a sudden everybody in healthcare is facing right now. And so, the mini MBA program that we have with the University of Arizona includes lessons from some of the best minds in business at the University of Arizona, but it also includes advice on how to execute and win on that. And so that's how we push the creative envelope in what we do. And, just to, take that even a little bit further, we're even talking with folks at the Royal Academy of Dramatic Arts. They're the leader in dramatic arts training, and a big part of, leadership is storytelling. So who better than to learn how to tell a story than the best storytellers out there? And so that's how, we're taking a creative, spin, or putting a creative spin on the traditional healthcare education.
I appreciate the example of just the collaborative nature of sort of taking from different courses and stacking that content, even when it's a competitor, because I think it gives almost a permission. I think some of us in careers, we're sort of waiting for that permission, whether it's from our boss or whether you see an example of it, but just hearing that it's okay to reach out to a competitor or to reach out to someone outside your industry or to solve a problem in a different way, I think gives people the thought process, what you said, to listen to the problems within your own organization and answer from the outside. I think that gives the permission to say, okay, we have this problem. Now, how do we solve it? Because maybe the competitor right next door is solving it already and they've moved on to the next problem. And so being able to ask them, and I think that starts that chain. Julie, something I've heard you talk a lot about from a creativity standpoint is the sort of soft skills. And just apart from the hard skills that you learn in a curriculum, I think that there's an angle there with creativity and soft skills. Can you speak to how you're infusing that?
Sure. I mean, a lot of times, especially in healthcare, things fall apart when the soft skills fall apart. It's sometimes you're in these situations where there's a lot of emotion and a lot of intensity. Again, what we've seen in the last several months with the pandemic and the stresses that's put on peoples and systems. And so we start thinking about, well, how do we help people, especially leadership, maintain their mission? If you look at mission statements for just about any organization, and they're always very inspiring. But when you're not sleeping and you're trying to think about, where to put people, and you can lose sight of that. And so one of the things we're working on is working with a luminary and the whole idea of heroic leadership, based in Jesuit traditions, on how do we cope with massive change and massive pressures, and still maintain our authenticity, our compassion. How do we use a discerning approach to very difficult decisions? How do we, in cases where you might feel like you're failing your community just because of the tremendous pressures on your hospital at the time, how do you maintain trust with your community? And so we're looking at bringing in people, again, from a different perspective, to work with leadership to do sort of master classes with them. Again, mindful of everyone's time and pressures, and say, how do we support you through this incredible period of time? But then looking forward, especially like emerging leaders, I've seen so many times, wonderful people, very much mission driven and very much, excited about, doing good things. And then they get a promotion, and all of a sudden they turn into a toe of the Hun, because they have a pretender or imposter syndrome, and so they think they have to be over authoritarian or whatever. And so, helping new leaders to keep their authenticity, to keep their spirit, their selves through the difficult, challenges. And so those are the things too that we're doing some focus groups now with variety of healthcare leaders to say, what are the things you think are missing now, and how do we help you get those soft skills, so to speak.
I think you talked about it earlier, of just the opportunity that course takers are able to say that I'm taking this course because I want to be better at my job. And I think a lot of times we think better at my job means like better able to perform this task, or sort of to the sledgehammer, like better able to use this hammer and do this. But I love that you're thinking and researching and getting the best in the world, sort of infusion into your courses of getting better might mean being kinder, being nicer in certain situations, being more aware of your own emotions and things. Yeah. And so I think
we do have reflective activities throughout our courses, and it's fun to see them. And a lot of times people will say, you know, I knew this, but it was nice to be reminded that I do need to slow down, or that I do need to remember to do X, Y, and Z. And so, you know, as we do the courses, we actually do, you know, pause throughout and force people to actually reflect on where they are in their jobs and how they're performing, and to take that minute, because, you know, when you're on a treadmill, it's hard to get off and look at what you've actually accomplished. And so and Kurt has, you know, mastered this. His group is just fantastic at reinforcing the curriculum with actual activities. But it really is so important for people to be able to take that breath and do some self-reflection and see where you are in the whole scheme, and say, hey, you know, I'm not doing so bad, and I need to remember to do this.
And I think that's sort of the power and the promise, at least, of the best side of technology, is you can sort of use that technology to get those messages, or to get that reminder sort of in the moment that you need it, or in an accessible and affordable way. And so obviously we're on Zoom right now, we're talking online education. Where does the sort of actual technology fit in? And how is it the key to all of this? Is it the be all end all? Is there a blend? Kurt, if you can jump at that one.
Yeah. And by the way, Julie, some of the most introspective moments in life have occurred on a treadmill. So that is, yes, I agree.
In the shower.
It used to be on the commute to and from work, but that doesn't.
Right.
Yeah, the technology space, Alex, that's my favorite space. You know, I'm a firm believer in the power of technology in learning. I also think it's an overhyped space where there's lots of noise and not a lot of outcomes in some cases. And so what we do is we try and keep it real. You know, everybody has seen, you know, the high fidelity mannequins that they use in clinical training. Well, these things are amazing. You know, these mannequins, you know, cry and sweat and have a heartbeat and all these things. And it's incredible that what that's done to clinical education. I mean, it's just, there's scenarios you can put people in that you just can't do or guarantee they'll be in without having that simulation. And so, you know, if you think about that and the impact that's had, we are looking at technologies, you know, to incorporate into our experiences to develop soft skills in that same effective way, where, you know, we're putting people into AI-powered virtual reality scenarios where they can, you know, develop communication skills. An example, you know, of one that I've been in to test this technology out is I had to be a doctor and talk to a mom and daughter about contraceptives. And I'm thinking, oh, my heart's pounding, my palms are sweating, you know, I'm like, you know, and it's so real, you know, and it's just, you know, that's the kind of, you know, skills development that we're after. And, you know, the beautiful thing is that technology is now going to allow us to do that at scale, right? And so it doesn't require people to come into a classroom. If people can do that kind of realistic training right from their chair at home or their chair at work. And, you know, we can schedule it at a certain time and, you know, things like that. It's not difficult to scale, and technology, you know, powers that. And so another area, you know, is the use of digital credentials. You know, we are big believers in the digital credential. One, in the way that an organization can better surface talent from within, so they don't have to keep looking from the outside and bringing new people in, but they can actually promote from within their own ranks because they can better understand the talent that they have and where they need to develop that talent. But then also for learners to better have mobility and move into organizations or jobs that they want that can improve the quality of their life. And so we see digital credentials as really the backbone of that. And so we've invested a lot in a digital credentialing infrastructure. So all of our programs are built on that infrastructure, so students can express the competencies that they've attained in very meaningful and understandable ways that they hold on to forever digitally. You know, last, I just want to touch back on what I mentioned about keeping it real. You know, technology can often, you know, be shiny and flashy and, you know, all of that, and it gets all this noise. But, you know, if you've, at least I've noticed that throughout all that noise, it advances pretty darn slowly, right? And so, but what's held tried and true throughout all these years is exactly what Julie just mentioned, and you, Alex, alluded to it earlier. It's authentic learning, experiential learning. This is hands-on learning, and we're just so committed to that in our programs. And sometimes it doesn't take fancy technology to do that. It takes understanding what the technology is that somebody uses on the job every day, and then mimicking that in the work that they're doing in our programs, and allowing them to practice the development of those skills and the knowledge that they're gaining in realistic ways. And so those are some of the ways that we use technology, and some of the ways that I see technology changing education as a whole.
And I'd like to add a little bit. I mean, I've taught classes with 150, 180 students, and I learned the names of the people in the front row. Right. So now with, Zoom and that sort of thing, I can create my lecture like anything that's knowledge based. I don't need to stand in front of a room and tell you, right? We can pre-produce that. We can make awesome videos and think about how learners actually retain information and create curriculum around that. But then I can actually meet with small groups of students like this and actually have very authentic, meaningful dialogue. Face to face is not the end all be all. And actually, I guess I can say this, some faculty, they've taught a class for many years, they kind of lowball it and they go in and they add you're teaching online, you need to be, I think, a higher level of prepared. And I think you can have a much more impactful curriculum because you can present information and ideas in multiple ways. And you can also use the time that we connect to really apply what you're learning. I think online education is wonderful for networking. I taught a class and we would have students from all over the world talking about, HIV. And so, you have somebody who grew up on a farm in Iowa and somebody who's, in San Francisco at a health clinic and somebody from Nairobi and to bring that richness into the learning environment. Professionally, I find when, especially for these professional development classes, you get a network there that is unparalleled. Hopefully these folks will be your network forever. Sometimes it's awkward to ask somebody within your own immediate setting questions, but it's easier to ask somebody that you had a class with that say, oh, I remember Alex had that job and he had some really great insights about XYZ, and now I am facing XYZ. I'm going to reach out to Alex and see what he can, if he's willing to talk to me. And so you get a different kind of network than what you would get sitting in a classroom that's, hindered by geography.
All right, Kurt, so I'm the daughter and you're the doctor, and you have to recreate this real quick.
My hands are sweating.
No, yeah, as you should. But I think we all see the sort of potential there, though, of like being in that and the reality feeling, having the ability to prepare for sort of the moments and the conversations that matter in our lives and in our careers, I think is something that a lot of us don't have access to right now. Something that we've tried to always do as part of the Advancement League when we do sort of virtual road trips and healthcare meetups and things is lead to action. And so I know you start off the call saying this is a sort of another webinar, and so you might sit through it, you might remember a couple quotes or things, but like what do you actually do because of it? And so I think there's two things that I'd love for both of you to give to the audience. And so just like the immediate, what do I do? So one, I think, is what can any level of a career, probably especially early in a career, but at certainly any level, what can they do tomorrow to get an investment from their employer? So if they're saying, I want to take the next step in my career, I want to get better at doing what I'm doing, or I want to change career and I want my employer to pay for it, how do you go about getting that investment in education? And then the second part of that is just being sort of a better digital student, or understanding, sort of ciphering through what's out there and what's quality and what's not, and what's going to actually be beneficial or valuable and what's not. So two things: what can they do tomorrow to get investment from their employer? And then just where do they start?
I'll start. I think you hit the nail on the head the first time. I think everyone needs to do some self-assessment, and that should happen on a regular basis. If the number one reason people are taking a class is because they want to improve their performance, what is it about your job that you don't feel prepared for, right? So I think you need to have a good handle on that. You might just have been, taken over a physician practice, and now you have to do marketing. Well, we have a certificate course in marketing, right? For that, you might have to do analytics. Those sorts of things. Like, what are the skills you really think that you need for the job right now? And make a list of those. Think about what you need today. Think about where you want to be a year from now, 5 years from now, right? So 5 years from now, that might be a different degree. You might want to go get an MBA or whatever. But maybe for the immediate, you have some real, pressing needs. And so, look at what's available. And a lot of what we create is for that sort of skill-based need, marketing, analytics, innovation, long compliance. And so I think everyone's got a homework assignment. I'm giving you guys kind of a poor grade on putting in the chat what your current challenges are. Evidently, you guys are all selling through it, but really do some self-assessment about the skills that you need, and then Kurt will talk about too. Not all programs are created equally. One of the reasons I really like this company is because it wasn't about selling degrees. It was about supporting people in the workforce. Sometimes you might need a degree to do the next thing, but oftentimes you don't. And as a dean, an academic dean, I've seen a lot of students go after these degrees that really didn't serve them personally and professionally, and they were very expensive. And students struggled with cost and time, et cetera. So I like the fact that our company is more focused on providing you a menu and really trying to support your journey throughout. And sometimes $1,000 short course might be just what you need for the immediate future. And so education doesn't have to be very expensive, and it doesn't have to take 4 years. I think you can get what you need in a variety of ways, and that's a lot of what we do is think about what are the needs to support the current workforce.
And I think you might have a plant in the chat here. There's a couple of folks that said, so some of their sort of current and future needs, so data analytics and project management. I think
we have those.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think that's the plant. I think there's built in, right? Less travel, which means doing business without being face-to-face, learning to network without being in person. That's been very challenging. And I think that goes back to some of the soft skills. That goes back to maybe some of the networking type courses of just how to do it. Another one said expecting grant budget cuts and changes to telemedicine policies that will alter workflows. And so same thing, I think if you're assigned to a physician practice and you have to, all of a sudden now your work's virtual and you got to stand up these systems and learn what technology to invest in and how to manage vendors. All of those are things you don't need sort of that full 4-year course for. You need to say, hey, I need to learn how to project manage and manage vendors. And here's that short option that I can really be good at that in this time.
Yeah,
I think
absolutely. And what I'll add here is that not all online programs are created equally. Anybody can create content nowadays, and there's a lot of providers out there that are just providing content, meaning videos and e-learning pieces, things like that are masquerading as online learning, but that's just content. That's as good as Netflix is to learning, right? The only thing you remember from Netflix is if you actually think about it, talk about it afterwards, and do things with it, intentionally after you watch it. But for us, what we see is that what Julie mentioned is learning occurs in hands-on application and feedback. That's where you get that. And so we focus a lot of attention on ensuring that there is somebody there in these learning experiences to give that kind of feedback to these learners so that they can grow and not just be a consumer of passive learning. And so I would just say that, not all learning is created equally. And so do your homework. So as you're looking for, options out there to present to your boss, for example, as we were talking about there, that it's, going to lead to actual skill development. And it's going to lead to long-term change for yourself and how you approach your job and do what you need to do. And so, I would even add out there is, I'm happy to, add my thoughts on anything anybody finds out there, just because this is what I do. I love this space. And so if anybody has any questions, is this good or is this bad? Would you recommend this? Feel free to hit me up on LinkedIn. I'm happy to, offer my thoughts on that, and I'll be unbiased. But obviously I like our stuff, but I will be unbiased because that's what I feel is the right thing to do. But yeah, that would be my advice for folks out there.
I love that. Thank you. And I think, Julie, you had offered up the same. I think if there's questions, comments, thoughts, please reach out to both Kurt and Julie. The other thing I think we want to talk about, and I see a couple more thoughts coming in on the chat here. So leveraging change management to reduce the red tape in politics that reduce the friction to change or reduce an organization's ability to change. I think, so I see there's probably
on that.
Yeah, I was going to say our mini MBA program covers that really well. So absolutely. Yeah,
I think change management will be so important for everything we all do going forward. I think as much as we think we know what's going to happen, it's going to change. It might happen and then it'll immediately change. And so we be prepared.
Yeah, change is inevitable, right? I mean, that is our job, is to manage change in organizations. I mean, an organization that stops changing is an organization that dies. And so how can we manage change, and how can we learn from the best minds out there on change management? And, in terms of politics, that's true within every organization as well. And so, one of the things that we focused on is how do you manage in a matrixed organization, which health systems often are. And so absolutely, there are effective strategies for managing change in a political environment. So, yeah, that's a great point. I think it's something that a lot of health professionals face.
I think one challenge right now, and this is coming from one of the attendees, so obviously we're in a very political climate, obviously this year with a political, with an election year and all that's gone on in politics. And then we also have the financial environment and the sort of financial crunch that happened to hospitals, certainly early in the pandemic and definitely now, as it's played out across the healthcare ecosystem. So someone asked, what case would you make to employers to pay for our education right now when budgets are so tight? That's, I think, a difficult conversation that probably needs preparation for and things, but I think there's probably ways to manage that conversation. Get a higher outcome.
I mean, one of the things that's incredibly important to us is the cost. We do a lot to keep the cost down. And so if I went to my boss and said, hey, will you support me for a $30,000 program? Odds are I'm going to get a no. But if I said, hey, there's this, $2,500 marketing program that I think we would get a huge return on investment on. It's not going to take me 2.5 years, whatever. You go with something very tangible, and the price points we're looking at, they're the range, but we have incredibly high quality courses for, I think, incredibly reasonable cost, $2,000, $3,000, $4,000. And the return on investment on that, again, can be immediate. I mean, we're getting data to show that what people are learning, they're putting into practice even before the course ends. And so part of that is, return on investment. These are really high quality, high impact training courses. Kurt, you want to?
I would just, even, pre-COVID, there was a huge demand for financial education. Alex, to your, point about the financial side of things. And so now, with COVID and what hospitals are facing in the budget cuts and, the impact that, the pause on elective surgeries has had and all of those things, there's an even greater need for financial education, and so to me, education is a means to get out of the situation that these systems are in. And I think organizations have learned over the past decades, that they can't just cut training and development budgets. Yes, they do get cut, and they were just completely slashed immediately, at any downturn. But I think the good organizations have realized that they can't just do that, because it's the grapes will wither on the vine. People have to learn and grow to stay engaged, and engagement is the key to coming out of any downturn. Employee engagement. And so there's a clear link between those things. And but to Julie's point, it has to be at a good price point, otherwise it doesn't make sense.
Yep.
And so that's why we're so focused on that.
So Raina says, as a department manager, I budget education and training in my department budget. So if the anonymous attendee who asked what case you would make for your employer to pay for your education, I think you send the bill to Raina. I think does it say I budget education for my department or for all? Okay.
And Raina, I'd love to speak with you, because I want to get more insight on how you're feeling about things right now. Just because it's always interesting to us to learn exactly what's going on, at the department level.
Another one says, organizational culture change. Since a high percentage of the workforce is virtual, how will this impact change management in your own organization personally? Yeah, I think that's going to be a difficult one going forward. And I think that probably speaks to some of the opportunities to educate the workforce. If you're all sort of working on soft skills and working on change management and working on sort of better project management from a virtual perspective, I think some of that change management will come down to better, quicker, more personalized education.
Yeah, and I'll have a real candid moment here. What a completely virtual working environment has done to me is it's thrown me on my back, because I've spent my career trying to develop my leadership skills, but they were all developed for an in-person environment. I was always with my team, engaging on a daily basis, interacting, face to face. And, for the past, 8 months now, I've been 100% virtual without any kind of face-to-face interaction. And I find myself back at square one in terms of having to figure out, how do I lead in a completely virtual setting? And it's challenging. And I'm seeking knowledge. I'm seeking information. I'm trying to learn, because it is different. It's very different.
That was one of the follow-up questions. Is there currently a course on how leaders can improve employee engagement skills in virtual teams?
No, but we'll have one created in the next week. I'm kidding. Because that's a great topic. I have seen, to be honest, I have seen a lot of articles that have been written around that topic. I haven't seen any courses, but I've seen a lot of articles.
So we just have a couple more minutes. I want to hit home. There's just from a partnership standpoint, Advancement League and Dignity Health Global Education. I think we have a great opportunity just for sort of immediate value to both attendees here and the broader sort of world of first, just a discount. So there's a micro site that we can send the link out to, and you can go through an Advancement League sort of portion of the DHGE website, and you have an immediate 10% off discount to all of the education courses that are offered. And so from a ROI standpoint, or going to your boss, you get a little bit extra incentive to say, okay, now I have an in there, I have a price break, it's just more to your story for your ask. I think the second thing is the opportunity sort of either immediately or long-term to lead a course or to help provide course content and sort of be a teacher in one of the courses. And then sort of that long-term vision is, I think if there are opportunities where we say, are there courses out there? I'm struggling with this of improving employee engagement skills in this new virtual world. Maybe you come to us, you come to Julie and Kurt and you say, I want to help co-create this course. I have the right experts, I have the right people, we can bring them together. And I think that's the nimbleness and the exciting thing about the future of sort of on-demand, real-time education. So just an open invite to everyone on the call right now and to your broader networks is reach out to us, any of the three of us, anyone associated with Advancement League. And if there's specific courses that you can't find in the world, let's create them. If there's specific courses you want to lead, let's get you leading. If there's specific courses that you want to take, let's get you them for cheaper. And I think you see it on the screen right here, the 50% off. I think Kurt or Julie can speak to that as well.
Yeah, we have a study buddy program right now. If you and a friend want to take a course together, you both get 50% off. So you bring a friend, bring more than one friend. It's not limited. If you brought 3 friends, then I'll get 50% off. So if you're interested, you can check out the website. I also did want to mention tomorrow we have a free webinar that should be really fantastic. We have some high-powered healthcare leaders, Chris Lowney, who's on the board of Common Spirit, former Jesuit, Wall Street executive. He's going to be on the board. Who else on the board? Kurt, Marvin O'Quinn from Common Spirit. But it should be a really exciting conversation. And again, rehumanizing healthcare leadership, very timely topic. So there's plenty of time to sign up. Just go to our website and you can sign up.
Yeah, thank you so much, everyone. I know we're hitting time here. Thank you, Julie and Kurt, for your expertise, for your enthusiasm, for your willingness to connect with everyone after and things. We're so grateful for you and excited for the partnership and to create a healthier future of both education and healthcare.
Great. Well, hopefully, I mean, seriously, folks, we're very genuine. Reach out to any of us with questions, ideas, just conversation. You know, this is a partnership, and we're better the more we interact. So the invitation is genuine.
Thank you for the opportunity, Alex. Appreciate it.
This was fun. More to come.
Thanks, everybody.